Well, for those of us that stayed up till past 1 a.m. Eastern watching the Browns preseason finale, at least they gave us an interesting game in the second half. They dropped it 37-33 against the Seahawks. But on today's video, I want to run through my Browns roster projection going into cutdown day, which is Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me open up by saying, hand up, this was the most difficult roster projection video I've ever made, simply because there are so many unknowns with players on the PUP list that people just have to guess whether or not they're going to be healthy by week 1. So, without further ado, let's start with the quarterback room. I've got the Browns taking 3 quarterbacks onto their 53-man roster: Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think DTR showed us some great strides throughout the preseason, and he has won that QB3 battle with Tyler Huntley. The only way he's not on the roster is if a team calls the Browns and makes him an offer they can't refuse, and they're like, you know what, we're comfortable enough with going with Huntley and adding a 4th or 5th round pick if they get an offer like that for DTR. Otherwise, I think those are going to be the 3 quarterbacks on this roster. As for the running back room, this is where the chaos kind of begins. I'm going to put Nick Chubb on the active 53-man roster, along with Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman, Pierre Strong, and then I'm going to keep Nyheim Hines, or not I'm going to, but I'm going to predict that Nyheim Hines stays on the NFI list. So, for those of you that don't know, if you are on the PUP list to open up the season, then you are out, along with the NFI list, for a minimum of 4 games to begin the year. So the Browns have to ask themselves, do they believe Nick Chubb will be healthy enough within the first 3 weeks of the season? Otherwise, it's in their interest to place him or keep him on the PUP list, move him from the active PUP list to the reserve PUP list. Then he misses the first 4 weeks, but he does not count towards the 53-man roster. So that's going to be a question the Browns have to ask and answer themselves for every single player of theirs on the PUP or the NFI list. Do they want to keep him on that list and open up an extra roster spot, or do they want to put him on the active roster knowing they may not be available for the first week or two, and you're going to have a roster spot somewhat wasted by a guy who's unavailable? So, what week do you think Nick Chubb will return? I'm optimistic that he's not going to require 4 weeks on the PUP list. He might miss the first week, maybe the first 2, but I think the Browns are going to want him back on the field as soon as he is available, and they don't want to stash him on the PUP list if he's only out 1 or 2 weeks, and he could have played in week 3 or week 4, but he can't because he's on the PUP list. Like, I think Nick Chubb is worth an extra roster spot, or I think Nick Chubb is worth the roster spot, even if he's not available for the first game or 2. As soon as he's available, he should be back on the field. So I think the Browns put Chubb on the active 53-man. As for Nyheim Hines, it's a guessing game for all of us because the Browns have been very tight-lipped when it comes to the injuries and all the guys on these PUP and NFI lists. But my gut feeling is Hines stays on the NFI list to open up the season, which means he is out for the first 4 games. Moving on to the wide receiver room. Another tough room to conquer, but I'm going to go with Cooper, Judy, Moore, Tillman as locks. And I believe David Bell and Jamari Thrash make the roster as well, which would put 6 players on the Browns roster in the wide receiver room. I think Jamari Thrash showed us last night that he is deserving of a roster spot. I also just don't believe the Browns are going to cut ties with a 5th-round draft pick 4 months later. So I almost want to say Thrash is a lock to make the roster. I think David Bell is going to make the roster as well. I think the Browns really liked what they saw out of him at the end of last season. He had an injury pop up in the middle of training camp this year, which put him on the sideline for a little bit, but I don't think they're ready to sever ties with a 3rd-round draft pick, so I think both those guys make it. And then players like Jalen Darden and James Prochet, they're optimistic they can sneak them through the waiver wire and place them on their practice squad. Same goes for Michael Woods, who had a stellar second half in Seattle. As for the tight end room, I'm actually going to go a little bit different here and just take 2 tight ends. Not that the Browns aren't going to have 3 tight ends on their roster, but I don't think the Browns feel like there are 3 53-man quality tight ends on this roster. David Njoku and Jordan Akins are locks to make the roster. After Giovanni Ricci went down with a knee injury and was released, that kind of cleared a path for Zaire Mitchell-Payton to make the roster. But my gut tells me that the Browns ultimately only roll with 2 tight ends initially, And they might move someone to injured reserve after roster cutdown day, open up a roster spot, and that's when they bring back a player like Zaire Mitchell-Payton. Or they put him on the practice squad and bring him up and kind of keep him as a taxi player for the first few weeks of the season, and then make a big boy decision as to what he's going to be long-term in Cleveland. Now, on to the offensive line. I'm going to put James Hudson at left tackle, not because he's starting over Jed Wills, but I think Jed Wills will remain on the PUP list. So the same spiel I gave for Chubb goes for Wills and Conklin. I think Wills will stay on the PUP list and miss the first 4 weeks of the season. It's just kind of been 0 dark 30 from Wills on his rehab. Batonio, Posick, Teller, of course, make the roster. Jack Conklin, I think, avoids the PUP list, and he is elevated to the active 53-man roster. And as a result, he is not going to miss the first 4 weeks of the season. It feels like he's been trending towards a return closer than Jed Wills based on just minor appearances around the practice field. Jermaine Ifedi, I think you have to keep on as an emergency tackle. Michael Dunn, he's been injured, but I think he'll make this roster. Nick Harris is your backup center. Zach Zinter is going to be a backup guard. And then DeJuan Jones, he might start at right tackle, and maybe they kick Jack Conklin to left tackle. Like Andy Dickerson and the Browns, if they do not have Jed Wills for the first 4 weeks of the season, or even week 1, they might get creative. If Conklin returns, he played left tackle at Michigan State. Maybe they move him back to left tackle and put DeJuan Jones at right tackle. Maybe they kick Joel Batonio to left tackle, and they put Michael Dunn in at left guard. So there's going to be some shuffling that goes around, but this is just my hunch. Jed Wills stays on the PUP, which does not account against the 53-man roster. James Hudson kind of gets promoted to starting left tackle, but that's just temporary. And Jack Conklin gets promoted from the PUP list to the active 53-man. Now, we're going to look at the defense in just a moment, but today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Now, let me give you an example of my selections. Prize Picks is offering one of these deals where you can get the Caleb Williams passing yards at 0.5. I think Caleb's going to go for 1 passing yard, so I'll take the more on that. I'm going to go less on Isaiah Pacheco's rushing yards, 66.5 against a stout Ravens run defense. And then I like the more on Justin Tucker at 1.5 field goals. This one is just fun to cheer for, field goals. And then finally, I'll take the more on Drake London, 65.5 receiving yards against the Steelers defense. So if you like my selections, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy at Prize Picks. Moving on to the defensive line. The Browns love to have depth here. So, Myles Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson. I think Tomlinson gets removed from the PUP list, so he is on the roster. Shelby Harris, Darius Smith, Okoronkwo, Quentin Jefferson, Mo Hurst, Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, and Mike Hall. You might notice that Siaka Ika is not on there. I don't think he makes the 53-man roster. I'm not even sure if they'll put him on the practice squad. Maybe because he was a third-round pick of theirs, they don't want to give up on him just yet, but I think the Browns are going to carry a bunch of depth at defensive line. They're going to hold on to fourth-rounder McGuire, and it's going to be a very similar defensive line to last year. As for the linebackers, I don't like carrying 6 linebackers for the 2024 Browns because I don't think that's an accurate reflection of the way this defense is headed. But I've got JOK, Jordan Hicks, Devin Bush, rookie Nathaniel Watson, second-year guy Diabate, and then Tony Fields. The Browns are kind of banged up at linebacker. They're likely just going to start or play 2 linebackers pretty much every game and have an extra DB and a nickel defense on the field. And that's going to be a lot of JOK and Jordan Hicks. So you don't really need 6 linebackers for 2 starting gigs. But With the new kickoff rule, maybe they'll put extra value in special team linebackers. The linebacker room is one that's going to be a little bit hairy. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns went out and added a linebacker from the waiver wire from another team that moves on from someone they like more. As for the corners now, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson. I'm going to take Greg Newsome off the NFI list, hopeful that he's ready for week 1 or week 2 at the latest. Myles Harden, the rookie, I think he's looked very impressive so far. I've got a roster spot for him. Cam Mitchell's going to make this team, and then Justin Hardy for special teams will make the team as well. If Denzel Ward and or Greg Newsome are unavailable for week 1, as Ward comes back from a concussion and Newsome comes back from a hamstring injury. Like last year, we saw the Browns go to the waiver wire. They added Chiefs cornerback Khalifa Halase, who got cut onto their active 53-man. So this is another room that could see some shuffling if they're not confident in the depth of their room with Ward and Newsome both battling injuries. Finally, the safeties. Juan Thornhill, Grant Delpit, Ronnie Hickman, and Rodney McLeod, with DeAnthony Bell remaining on the PUP list. Again, the same spiel for Bell goes for everyone else on the PUP list. Like, these are just kind of hunches. No clue as to where DeAnthony Bell is in his rehab, whether he's really close or still has a little ways to go. But the Browns are, quickly approaching 53 players, so they might just stash DeAnthony Bell on the PUP list going, well, we don't want to release you because you're going to get claimed immediately, but we also don't want to put you on our active roster because you're not healthy enough to play for the first few weeks of the season. So we'll keep you on the PUP list, and when 4 weeks are up, chances are someone else will be injured, and you can take their roster spot. Finally, special teams, very simple. Hopkins, Bojorquez, and Hewlett. So that is my active 53-man roster projection. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we've got a new Instagram account. If you're not following us over there, please consider doing so. Browns Report IG. And then finally, if I'm not too needy, hit me up on Twitter, at Matthew Petey. I'm always talking brownies over there. So that's enough plugs for one show. Appreciate everyone for hanging out with us. But I do want to know, how would you grade the Browns roster on a scale of 1 to 100? So, Madden style, what grade are you going to give this Browns roster? Scale for me 1 to 100 down below in the comment section. I would give it an 88. Like the Chiefs in Madden this year are a 92, so that feels appropriate. Give me an 88 for the Browns 2024 roster. And then last but certainly not least, I just want to wrap up the show by showing some love to members of the Brown and Orange Club, sending in $50 in Super Chats during our watch parties. Tim Green, Mike Dibble, Jeremy Stallman, Slow But Sure, David Botner, Jared Brandt, James Harper, Papa T, Joseph DePorte, and Mike. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you have shown the channel. Shout out to everyone in the Brown and Orange Club. Now, let's wrap up the show by picking a card. Which card do you want to go with, Reed? Try again.
There we go. Here I am. All right, let's go with Ace of Spades. Got to go with
Spades.
That.
All right, I'm going to go with the 3 of diamonds. No, 10 of diamonds. 10 of diamonds. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you all tomorrow.